Hello and welcome to MalMakes. Today we're doing a painting based on Among Us. This is the full version. If you're interested in the time-lapse, you can click on the card here. Otherwise, let's get started. Like a lot of people on Twitch and YouTube and on the internet, I've been playing Among Us with friends and it's been so much fun. I actually really like being the imposter and I think it's a fun role for me because I'm not stressed out by it and people don't suspect that I'm the imposter, so it's easy for me to blend in and do well as the imposter. I thought it would be a fun painting to paint from outside of the Skeld ship, with a galaxy in the background and someone being ejected from the ship. So what I want to do first is, on top of my already painted black canvas, I need to bring in the galaxy using a sea sponge. So I have my canvas painted black, I have my colors ready to go. I'm going with a blue, teal, green scheme because a lot of my different galaxy paintings have purples, pinks, and blues. I thought this would be fun to go more in a green direction, also to contrast the person I'm going to have floating in the space sky. And I also have some titanium white in case I want to lighten anything up and do more layers. Now I have that on my palette. I have gloves on because this is very messy and I really don't want all of these pigments on my fingers and some of them getting underneath my nails where it's hard to wash off. And I have my sea sponge that's wet but not dripping wet. I'm going to start with my blue colors and tap those in the areas that I want to be blue, working into the teal color and then into the green. If I go from blue to green, it'll just make my green color look teal because there'll still be some blue on the sponge. I'm going to work my way to the green, kind of around the color wheel. That way, the colors that'll be in between will naturally occur and it won't make one look the other way. I think this background turned out nice, but the thing that always brings them together and makes them look amazing is adding stars. So I'm using Golden's High Flow Acrylic and Titanium White, which is an opaque white. You want to make sure you shake it because the pigment does settle a little bit and we want to make sure we get the most pigment for what we're using. So it's dispersed evenly in the solution. I also have an old toothbrush and you can see that there's black paint and white paint and some blue paint on this. I only use this for painting and I'm going to be dipping the tips of the bristles just right here along the bottom in the white paint. And then I'll pull them back and then release them towards the canvas. I find that these toothbrushes add better stars than using like a splatter brush or using the trick where you have two paintbrushes and you hit, because I find that sometimes you'll get these lines of paint instead of little dots. I find that with the toothbrush, you're more likely to get little dots and not have the string lines that you would get with some of the other techniques. The other thing I recommend is wearing a glove on whatever hand you're going to be touching the bristles with because that will get full of paint. Just make sure that it's pretty tight to your fingers so you don't have all of the extra glove material that will catch all of the splatter instead of the canvas. So I just have a little bit of paint and I'm going to pull it back with my gloved hand and then release towards the canvas. And you can move it around and aim it into different areas as you need to, adding a little bit extra in some areas. Now I find that it's really easy to go overboard and add too many stars. So when you feel like you could add a little bit more and then maybe it's done, don't add any more. Don't do that. Just stop, let it dry, come back later and see how you feel about it. Because chances are that if you added those extra, it would be too many stars. Over the years of doing paintings, I've really learned a lot about using chalk pastel on canvas. The canvas needs to be totally dry, for a couple reasons. The first one is that if it's wet in any way, the paint, the surface, any part of it has any moisture, it will gum up the tip of the chalk pastel and it won't write. It just sticks to it and it doesn't stick to the canvas and it just doesn't work. You have to let it dry out completely, maybe sharpen it to get rid of any of that part that's been messed up, let it dry, and then it will write again. So it needs to be dry in order to write. Second, is it needs to be dry in order to erase. It needs to be fully cured, bonded to the canvas, and not going anywhere. I found that sometimes if I haven't let it dry at least 24 hours, when I wipe the chalk away from the surface, I get some of the pigment and color on my towel, and that means it's not fully cured and bonded. It's erasing itself, and you may not be able to tell on the canvas, but I surely don't want any of it to get messed up, so I really make sure that it's dried for at least 24 hours before I start to draw and erase anything. With it done and definitely dried for at least 24 hours, I can start to draw the ship and the imposter. Now with the Skeld, I originally drew it without the flippers, but I did some more research and you can see on some of the tasks where it definitely has flippers, and I really like the flippers for a couple reasons. First, sea turtles I have an affinity for them a little bit. Where we live, we have them. They're an endangered species. People track the nests to make sure we're still getting turtles on the beaches and how many to keep track of their numbers. It's super cool. Plus, it adds a lot to the composition to add the flippers in here. I've roughly drawn them in with pencil so I can sort of see where they're going to go, but now I need to draw it with chalk pastel and make sure I have all of the angles and sizes right exactly how I want them before I start to block in some of the base colors like green and gray and blue. I know I haven't talked much about the Skeld, but it's because everything I've been doing is super tiny. I even have the tiny little dots and the lines on the transmitters over by the satellites on the right shoulder here. So I'm working on these details and continuing to add things. I'm pushing the turtle motif a little bit, and this is just in chalk. I'm not sure I want to keep it yet. I might make it a bit more angular like the rest of the turtle, just to bring that idea to it and still keeping it angular and not as much like a turtle. So I haven't decided on that yet, but it's just drawn in chalk. I finished all of the detail here that you can see in game. I still have to do the weapons up here, and I've started to shade in the flippers. So I have it dark on the sides and lighter on the top, but bringing in some shading where it overlaps so you can see that it's a different part than the body. Right now I'm working on the engines in the back. I started by painting the light part light gray. Now I've mixed up 4 different grays, and this one is number 2. I have a lighter gray and 2 darker grays to fill in the rest of these engines. Towards the bottom it's going to get a bit darker, and then each of the fins is going to have different grays based on where they are. So if they're towards the top left of each rocket, they're going to have lighter colors, but if they're towards the bottom right, they're going to get even darker colors. I'm just going to use all 4 of those different grays to bring in shading, so it looks like they're actually sitting here in round on the back of the ship. I wasn't sure I wanted to push the sea turtle motif this far, but I drew in all of the scoots on the carapace and I liked how it looked a lot, so I'm going to push it even further. Now these lines are very, very straight. They don't have the curves that the actual sea turtle shell has, and I did base this off a green sea turtle because it was green already and I thought that worked better than like a Kemp's Ridley or something. So I have these strong scoots here with the strong lines, and I'm going to be using dark greens and light greens, the same ones I've already been using on the Skeld, and draw in these lines just to give a hint that they're there. The same with the little patterns I've drawn on the flippers and on the head. And that completes the Skeld ship, and the last thing I would have to paint is the imposter. So I've started to draw that in here, keeping a nice line to give a leading line throughout the painting. Now I'm not sure on how big it needs to be yet, so I've just started to block it in a little bit. I haven't finished it, but it'll get a coat of white first, and then I'll start painting the colors and the value on that later. I have to paint the imposter in stages. I can't fill it all in solid titanium white because I'll lose the lines I have for the mask and exactly where the oxygen tank is. So I have to do one at a time. So I filled in the oxygen tank white and now I can paint it red. And I'm using cadmium red hue for this because I think it'll stand out really nice on the green of the background right here because red and green contrast each other. But the ship is also green, so I thought that would be a nice contrast to the ship as well. So I'm using that cadmium red hue for the main part of the body, and for the shadow I'm using phthalo blue to make it a little bit violet to fill in the shadow parts on the back right side of the imposter. And we're done! We have the Skeld ship from Among Us. If you're interested in this piece, you could buy a poster or a phone case, or bid on this original canvas. There's links down below. Also consider supporting me on Patreon. You can find out more at supportmal.com. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes of MalMakes, and I'll see you again here for another video game painting.